Welcome to podcast number 207. Has your life been affected by pornography? If not, it will be. Be warned.
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Welcome, everyone. I hope you're doing well, and I definitely have a great podcast topic for you today. We're going to go over some really crucial information, but I'm going to reorder how I typically do things. So here you go. Let's first talk about some feedback. I got some really good feedback, and so I want to let you know at the first part of this podcast as we go through the outline. So here we go. How funny, Jason. You might be as bad as Google or Facebook listening into my conversations. I literally discovered your podcast a couple of weeks ago and have been hooked. I also recently made a transition from a superintendent to a planning and support role. With those two things, I've been shooting your podcast out to all my friends and colleagues across the central region. Keep it up, man. You are moving construction in the right direction. So I really thought that was nice. I really appreciate the person that sent this. I always love feedback. So I just want to say that I want you to have a really good time on today's podcast. It's a little bit different topic today. I hope you're doing well. I hope you enjoy it. And if you're surprised by the content of this podcast, meaning the title or the topic, and if you are, that's precisely because we have a problem. This won't be the first time that I present information on this topic, and I just want to say that I really hope that you stay with me, stay with the rest of the podcast. I'm not being judgmental about this topic. I'm warning us because it's a big problem, and I know of as many people that have problems with this as I do people that have been seriously injured by a safety incident. That might seem difficult to believe, but it's absolutely 100% true. So I'm going to give you an opening quote here and hope that it helps set the helps set the scene, and then I'm going to give you some stories and some information. So this is a quote from Ralph Yarrow. He's a former Novell executive who now devotes his time to fighting pornography. And this is what he said. This is our conflict for today. Wake up. Apathy will kill you here. If pornography hasn't touched your life already, it's going to rip huge gaping holes in it. You better get active really quickly. And so that's the opening for us today. Let me give you some stories about why this is important to me. Again, I know of as many people whose lives have been injured or actually destroyed. In my opinion, that's my definition by pornography, as I do people that have been seriously injured in construction. And so I talk about safety all the time, but what about mental safety? So I'm going to talk in kind of high and covered tones, meaning I'm not going to get too detailed into this to where you know what I'm talking about, who I'm talking about. If you were ever there, I don't want you to know if I'm talking about that situation. I'm going to talk in kind of veiled tones here, but I knew of a person that was so bright and wonderful and just sharp, just knew how construction worked, knew about finances, knew about technology. I mean, this person was sharp. And I remember visiting him on a project and then later finding out that he had been arrested. And what had happened is he got addicted to pornography and it went into a downward spiral and was about to get married, had hidden this stuff from his fiance. And the way that his fiance found out was because he had started sending pictures to some of the bridesmaids, and it come to find out, she had found out that he had embezzled lots of money in his professional career to pay for pornography. And that embezzlement, those charges, landed him with some legal troubles. And so he was terminated and lost his fiance, everything, his reputation, everything that he had going for him. and literally destroyed his life. And then I remember a couple years later finding out that he did get a second chance, and I was pretty happy for him. And what wasn't good about the situation is that he went into a relapse and lost his job again and did some pretty horrible things. And I remember the person that actually cleaned up his computer, and that person confidentially told me that his computer was riddled with pornography, some really, I don't know if illicit is the right word, but some really illicit stuff. And so at that moment, my mind just kind of became open to this world and how hard this world could be on people, and, just how destructive it was. I was very surprised because when I grew up, it wasn't a thing. It was some things that, boys typically did, not a big deal. So this was the first time that I saw that it can have consequences and really like destroy somebody's life. So over and over after that, and this might seem too general, but I'm talking about specific instances of where somebody explained to me, because I deal with a lot of young couples in construction, do a lot of training, and I'm telling you, a lot. I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say a lot, had expressed to me that they had childhoods where they either knew of or they had been molested by older brothers in their household, and it stemmed from pornography as children. And that there were certain aspects of their lives or marriages when they'd invite me over for dinner or whatever, and that they explained to me that stemmed from these experiences. And I remember going home and telling Katie, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea that this world existed, that this was happening." And then you start to hear, and I did personally, that 1 out of 4 children are sexually molested in some way or another, and that most of the time the perpetrators began their, um, I don't, what do you call it, their offensive behavior with pornography. And I have to tell you that I have been around it's at least 10 to 12 people whose marriages have been severely impaired, or whose marriages have been destroyed since that time from pornography. And I've been in church leadership positions to the point where now I'm convinced that 8 out of 10 youth have problems with it wherever you go throughout the United States. And I just want to say that I know of people with legal restrictions that have had divorces, whose marriages are completely destroyed, people who can't have children, people who are now registered sex offenders because of this, and people that would have otherwise not had these things happen. And I could continue to go on and on and on and on. But that representative example of that super bright young man at the beginning of this podcast that I was talking about is representative of what I continually see. And I don't see the pornography, that's not what I'm saying, but I see these people being affected by this. And so I've gone through a little bit of research, and I'm gonna cover this podcast topic again. But the bottom line is, why am I talking about this? If you're asking yourself, "Holy cow, Jason's gone off the deep end," um, I hope that's not the case, because I love that you listen to the podcast. But I can explain to you that the reason I'm focused on it is because I care about the safety of people, and I care about families. And there's so many young families, so many young people coming up in construction. I want to help. And specifically, the reason that we're losing this war with this is because we can't openly talk about it. So I've weighed in the balance, losing podcast listeners and possibly offending somebody versus being able to help. And I really hope that I'm able to help. Again, this isn't the first time that I'll cover this topic. We are losing this battle. So let me go through some stuff. I've really found this interesting, and I've really found it to be true that we have a problem and that we're losing this battle. Perhaps the most sobering statistic was that 87% of young men from 6 universities have sought out and viewed pornography in the last year, with 20% viewing it daily or nearly every day. Now, that doesn't sound horrible. I think we all could have guessed that. It's the consequences and the addiction that follows that really has to be a focal point of this podcast, and the realization that we have. You have to safeguard yourself. If you're secretly involved, hopefully this podcast and some of the books and works that you're able to reference will convince you that there will never be peace for you until you are healed from the addiction, if in fact you're addicted. So I frankly realize and recognize that there are people that participate with this that don't get addicted, that have a casual viewing of it for entertainment and for pleasure. I want to say that is not the majority of cases. Most of the time we get into, especially with young people, mental addiction, and we're losing the war with this. And so to treat pornography, if somebody gets into an addiction, you have to know that it is a full addiction. And there are 12-step support groups for specific to pornography and other things that are associated with it that help people. And so the key is, and I'm just going to cover a couple of things, that we have to know that it is an addiction. That disclosing of the addiction, if somebody has it, is the key to recovery. And we can't just emphasize avoidance. We have to also extend a hand of healing to people who are trapped into this, and especially those who are trapped in the secrecy, and provide a safe place for them to seek help. We have to really be ready to support these types of people. Types of people is the wrong way to say it. These wonderful people that are in this trap with a 12-step support program. And recognize that there are many men already that are secretly addicted. You know, in Elevate Construction, our focus is to respect workers, train leaders, and preserve families. And what better way to help preserve families than to bring some awareness around this topic? There's so many married men are secretly addicted. And we have to provide support groups for them, but also their spouses in those situations so that they can head towards recovery. Nobody would tell an alcoholic to pray, repent, and move forward without also sending them to Alcoholics Anonymous and or therapy. Leaders and family members and support people in this industry and friends must understand that recidivism rates for pornography and sexual addiction are as high or higher than substance abuse addiction, and therefore require the same support for long-term sobriety and strong recovery. Because recovery is what we're shooting for. Even if a person in addiction has momentary pleasure or some irresistible urge, the price of acting out in addiction seems paltry compared to the temporary payoff, and the despair in between episodes of acting out increases as losses accumulate, and it brings the person into a downward spiral where they have to have ever increasing episodes of stimulation, which leads to the illegal acts and the broken marriages. And so I just want to continue with a couple of other things. So I'm reading this book, and it's one of a few sources, but I really appreciate an analogy that they have, and it's from an African safari. And he has a picture here of what's called adrenaline grass, and it's along the banks of Zambezi. Now, when they do tours in Africa, the tour guides will call it adrenaline grass. Sorry, and he asked the question, "Why is this called adrenaline grass?" And the tour guide said, "Look closely, more closely." And there was a photo of a lion sitting in the shade, and they're like 6 feet away. So there's no glass railing, there's no barricades, there's nobody with a gun, there's nothing. There's like literally tourists 6 feet away from an African lion. And it's really, once people realize that, their adrenaline starts going. That's why it's called adrenaline grass. And so this is what is said in the book. And the book is called "He Restoreth My Soul," and it's by Donald L. Hilton Jr., a medical doctor. He's a professional, actually a world-renowned professional on this and neuroscience. And so he says, "Now I understand what I did not understand," to quote the words of South African writer Alan Paton. "The lions would wait until the animal came to the edge of the water to get a drink. the lion strangling it of oxygen until it succumbed. It would then devour the animal, leaving scraps for hyenas and jackals. I knew I was seeing a powerful object lesson here and took these photographs. We have to be vigilant because pornography is as an adversary, like a roaring lion walking around seeking whom it may devour. The spiritual lion hides in the dark and waits for unsuspecting victims. It grabs them by the spiritual throat and strangles the life out of happiness, joy, companionship, learning, love, both romantic and platonic, spirituality, reason, and life itself. And this is a really important part here. I hope you're jamming with me when I say this. It provides the false promise of an exciting double life where the person that's involved can have the best of both worlds. Sadly, the person mired in addiction finds in the end that this double life leaves joy in neither of the worlds, with even the sexual self being ruined and consumed as the chemically altered brain is left to crave what can never be fully satisfied. I want to say that last line again. With even the sexual self being ruined and consumed as the chemically altered brain is left to crave what can never be fully satisfied. So, what in this analogy of the lion allows the person in the second, once the people realize that he's there, he or she, to be seen in the second picture? It's light. And we have to get this topic out into the light. There are a couple of things that I want to mention. That when people are in this trap, they feel guilt and shame. They say to themselves, I don't need to tell anybody because I don't want to hurt anybody else. Or they say, I can get rid of this on my own without anybody else. I'm strong enough. I'm somehow different than everyone else. But all they're doing is living in isolated agony, especially if it's an addiction. Even if it's not addiction, you begin to compare real human relationships with the pornographic images, and life isn't as fun as it otherwise would have been if you were free, or if I or if any of us were free from pornography in our lives. So spouses may find the knowledge of knowing about this in this podcast or in briefs or in journals or in books helpful to give a clear perspective about what their sons, husbands, and loved ones are going through. In the end, what we're shooting for is recovery. So let's talk about what addiction is really quickly. Let me tell you about a quick little poem. It says, what win I if I gain the thing I seek? A dream, a breath, a froth of fleeting joy. Who buys a minute's mirth to wail a week? Or sails eternity to get a toy for one sweet grape who will the vine destroy? Or what fond beggar but to touch the crown would with the scepter straight be stricken down? By William Shakespeare. That represents how bad of an addiction this is. So let me explain one thing here really quickly. Addiction represents a pathological yet powerful form of learning and memory. Why should you stop? Because you can't. An addicted person's damaged willpower alone is not enough in overcoming addictions. Church leaders, facilitators, therapists, family members, all of these folks in a person's life are key to facilitating recovery. Pride stemming from a lack of gratitude allows the person to entertain desires that selfishly disregard the consequences visited upon not only the addicted one, but also upon his loved ones. Satisfaction of the addiction becomes the ultimate priority, yet surely a greater oxymoron does not exist. The perspective of the person acting out an addiction is progressively constrained until nothing exists but obsession. Addiction is the very definition of selfishness, the ultimate contracture of perspective. When cravings begin, reasoning ends. The addictive cycle goes like this. There's first preoccupation. The person begins to withdraw and isolate from the ones he loves. Ritualization. The person places himself in a position in which he's ready to act out. Then acting out. And then despair. The person feels shame and guilt. These emotions drive him deeper into secrecy and deception. Now, again, I want to fully recognize that some people never get to the preoccupation phase, but that is not typically what happens. Typically, people go into the addiction phase where they find themselves compulsively viewing pornography, into escalation, where the addicted person seeks progressively harder core pornography to get the same effect, desensitization, where the tolerance increases to progressively explicit material, and number 4, acting out sexually. The person seeks to act out fantasies viewing in pornography and may then lead to prostitution, adultery, or other illegal acts. When the pain of the losses accumulated exceeds the payoff of viewing pornography, the person will do what it takes to stop. But in the end, it will be worth any price paid, since it is the only way back to sanity and peace. So I hope this has been helpful, because it's really been eye-opening to me, not only to read some of the research. And so some of the other podcasts that I'm going to do, this is already 20 minutes long. Some of the other podcasts that I'm going to do will talk specifically about how the addiction cycle basically starts, and how it chemically is no different, meaning it is a chemical addiction. It's not something that's just visual. It is a chemical addiction, and that it can affect any one of us. And if we're not careful, if we're not vigilant, we can be caught in that same trap. I want to say just a couple of things before I leave. What eventually happens here is that families are limited. In situations in the past, especially in Rome, sexual excesses may have reduced human fertility. The avoidance or deferment of marriage had a like effect. Moral decay contributed to the dissolution. Men had now, in the middle and upper classes, the means to yield to temptation. Moral and aesthetic standards were lowered by the magnetism of the mass, and sex ran riot in freedom, while political liberty decayed, and families were reduced, and the population decreased. The men that are in this story, and they're overwhelmingly men, who become hooked on this bilge are often miserable about it. They know that it affects their capacity to love and be loved by real women. As Douage explained, pornographers promise healthy pleasure and a release from sexual tension, but what they often deliver is an addiction, tolerance, and an eventual decrease in pleasure. Paradoxically, the male patients I work with often crave pornography but didn't like it. And so Dr. Douage says they reported increasing difficulty in being turned on by the actual sexual partners, spouses, or girlfriends, though they still considered them objectively attractive. When I asked if this phenomenon had any relationship to viewing pornography, they answered that it initially helped them get more excited during sex, but over time had the opposite effect. Now, instead of using their senses to enjoy being in bed in the present with their partners, lovemaking increasingly required them to fantasize that they were part of a pornography script. And this is typically what happens. And it's interesting that this kind of habit or behavior is also seen in the natural world. There are, what are they called? They're called gypsy moths, were once causing havoc by the billions and destroying forests in the United States. And scientists found out how to destroy them with pheromones. So instead of, what do they call that, toxic pesticides, they figured out that all they had to do was spray pheromones to destroy this particular insect, the gypsy moth. And this is what it says in the quote here. The male either becomes confused and doesn't know which direction to turn for the female, or he becomes desensitized to the lower levels of pheromones naturally given out by the female and has no incentive to mate with her. The insects follow the pheromone trail into the trap, and the species dies out because they no longer reproduce and they're no longer in family units. And this is supported by the fact that in humans, that young men now statistically find pornography more interesting and appealing than natural sexuality in a committed relationship where shared parental responsibilities allow for the rearing of children. And we're talking about, like, if you want to know how many people are affected by this, it's at least, statistically 8 out of 10 people. And I want to leave you with a quote, and this is by Walt Kelly. We have found the enemy, and he is us. And so why did I take your time this morning for a podcast about pornography? The reason is because my purpose is to bring back respect into construction, to train leaders, and to preserve families. So not only do certain construction individuals, especially males, and I've been there before, way back in my past, where you see stuff like this, you joke about it, you objectify women, and that comes out in your behavior at work in a professional setting, which there's no place for that. There's no place for that. And the other thing is that it frankly destroys marriages. We're just all blind to it, and it destroys people's lives. There are, again, those who can view pornography and not get addicted. There are those who can do this and not get stained. There are those who cannot get burned. But that is not the statistical probability here. The probability is that somebody gets addicted, they begin to objectify, they ritualize, and then it affects their lives and many times leads to illegal acts where I personally know of people who are now forever, or let's just say with as long as they live, affected by legal restrictions because of this addiction that they had entered into. This is killing our young people. And it's killing our young people and our marriages because we can't talk about it. It's hurting us. It's rewiring our minds. It's just as addictive as cocaine or heroin. It's actually a chemical addiction, and it's rewiring our brains. And so my challenge would be to get more active in understanding and being aware of the destructive effects of pornography. And also, if you are in the middle of it and it's an addiction and you can't stop, ask yourself the question, can you stop? And if the answer is no, then you have a problem. And if you are being desensitized away from your wife or your husband or your partner because of this, then it's ruining natural relationships where we need love, connection, and proximity. And so I would encourage you to get help. And the way to get help is by bringing it out into the light, talking about it, and actually going to programs that can help you with this chemical addiction. Everything must be done in balance in life. And pornography is one of those things that will throw you into an imbalance. And so I am warning you and forewarning you again that if pornography has not touched your lives, beware, because it's about to rip wide gaping holes in it. Let me give you the exact quote. Wake up. Apathy will kill you here. If pornography hasn't touched your life already, it is going to rip huge gaping holes in it. You better get active real quick, especially within your family. On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.